Hi, my name is Brian, and I'm here with Miss Nguyen, and we are going to continue talking about energy. So far in our fourth grade lessons, what we've looked at with energy is that systems change or things change, and they only change when energy is added or energy is taken away. So we've also seen that there has to be something to add energy or to take it away. And so I'm going to talk just for a moment and give it one more example of how this works, and do that by jumping over to the lab camera. So I'm going to mute here and then head over to the lab. All right, so what we have here is a bunch of marbles and one extra marble. And I want to use this example to introduce a term, and that term is system. In science, when you're talking about a group of objects, then the objects make up something called a system. So if you're talking about biologists, you might have heard the term ecosystem. And an ecosystem is just a group of plants and animals and the soil and the air that all interact together. When we're talking about sciences that are not life sciences, when we're talking about physical sciences, systems are often groups of objects. And so we define the system as the group of objects. And the nice thing about this particular example is we have a boundary. So I've got this cardboard tube here, and the cardboard tube is kind of a barrier. And what this cardboard tube separates is the system, the marbles, from everything else. And we have another word called the surroundings. And so the system is the thing that we're looking at, and the surroundings are everything else. So if we look at this particular system, what we see is nothing is moving. And if we left the system here, and the system is isolated, and isolated just means all by itself, then we wouldn't expect the system to change at all. For a system to change, energy has to come from outside of the system. Energy has to come from the surroundings. So right now, the big marble on its own cannot change anything about the position of the little marbles. But if I, in this case, this is my hand, and I'm coming from I'm part of the surroundings, if I act on the system, I can change the system. And I change the system by moving this ball around. I can also change the system if I give this ball energy. So I'm going to give this ball energy, and let's watch how the system changes. Well, if I hit everything else, it works better. Let's try that again. So now we see a bigger change to the system. So the little input of energy caused the system to change. The energy came from the surroundings. I transferred energy from the large marble, and for a period of time, the only thing in the system that was moving, and therefore the only thing that was changing position and had energy, was the big marble, until it collided with all the other marbles and they scattered. So once everything was moving, everything had energy. And as we saw, eventually we came back to the point where the system is again not moving, and the system has no more energy present inside it. Again, something can come along and add energy to the system, something from the surroundings, and cause the system to move again. So Ms. Fong is going to spend some time, or Ms. Nguyen is going to spend some time now reading with us and talking about energy, and specifically energy of things that are moving. Thank you, Ms. Nguyen. Ms. Nguyen, you were very courteous and muted me there, but you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right. Well, that's good. Didn't want to interrupt your demonstration. All right. So we are on lesson 3. And today's big question is, how are energy, change, and movement of objects related? Our objective today after the reading is we're going to create a picture to show how energy transfers in a system of moving objects. Remember that this is the book that we are reading. You can read along if you have your own copy. We are reading chapter 2 today, which is moving objects have energy. Chapter 2. Everywhere you look, you see things move. Riders pedal bikes, people walk and run, birds fly, fish swim along the bottom of the ocean. Rain falls from the sky. Objects move in deep space too. Planets orbit stars. Meteoroids move through space. Another word for the movement of objects is motion. Motion occurs when something changes position. Other things that I can think of that move are things like I could see the leaves falling outside my window on a windy day. I can see that rabbit who hops away from my garden when I chase it out of it so it doesn't eat my tomatoes and my lettuce. And I can see a ball flying out into the outfield in baseball when there's a home run. What are some examples of objects moving that you can think of? So keep some of those things in mind for later today. So here is the second half of this page, and I can see that there's the vocabulary up here. It tells me again that motion is the process of an object changing position. And Brian shows you that with the marbles changing position. Here we have a photograph of a basketball and a little arrow that shows that someone threw the ball up over the rim, and now the ball is through the net. So the ball's position changes as it falls through the hoop. So the whole arc of a ball from the player all the way down, that's a big arc. So that's lots of changing of positions here. Think about describing motion. Moving objects are described by how their position is changing. Scientists describe how fast an object is moving in changing position. Scientists also describe the direction in which an object is moving, left, right, up, down, and so on. And so this is pretty important about moving objects and how we describe them. We have two ways. One is its speed, which is how fast or how slow it's moving, and also its direction. So for example, in basketball, like in this picture, we can see a basketball player, like when we're watching the Lakers or the Rockets or any of your other favorite teams playing, the Grizzlies out in Memphis. The basketball player might be dribbling the ball slowly, or he might be dribbling the ball very quickly. He might be doing a slam dunk, so the ball moves a different way than when he has a jump shot. I also think about the cars that we are in. They can move left and right, but they also can move forwards and backwards. So we have here, moving objects can cause changes. Some objects, such as the basketball players in the picture, cause their own motion by moving their muscles. They jump and run from one end of the court to the other. The movement of muscles causes change. Other objects, such as a basketball, are put into motion by outside motion. Moving basketball players cause the ball to change position. The player's hand dribbles the ball up and down. Players pass and catch the ball across the court. So in all these examples, the moving objects cause changes. The moving objects, they have energy, like that Brian showed you with the marble. Right, so this section here of my text has the heading, Moving Objects Have Energy. I know this section is going to teach me about how they have energy. When a moving basketball hits a net, swish, the net moves. The net changes from sitting still to moving. When a skier slides down a slope of fresh snow, whoosh, the snow changes from powdery to hard and packs beneath the skis. When falling raindrops hit the surface of a smooth puddle, splash, the surface of the puddle changes from glassy and still to rippling with motion. Flying basketballs, speeding skiers, falling raindrops, and all other moving objects have energy. How can you tell? You can tell because moving objects can cause change, and energy is the ability to cause change. All moving objects have energy of motion. So we have that energy of motion, which is the energy an object possesses while it's moving. So that's our big idea about energy today, is that we have energy of motion. So that vocabulary box really highlights for us this phrase. So here's a drop of water, a raindrop. It's hit the puddle. Right? So when that rain falls, it's moving through the sky, but once it hits the surface of the water, you can see in this very close-up picture that the water is splashing in different places, and you can start to see that it makes a little bit of a round ripple, and if we were videoing this, you could probably see the ripples moving across as well. So we can see that it's involved, this energy from the rain falling, hitting the puddle, now makes the puddle move. People use the energy of motion. So this section is going to teach me how do people use energy of motion. Hammers and nails. Because moving objects can cause a change, a moving object can be useful. Well, that is very important to know because people want things to be useful. People have figured out many ways to use the energy of objects in motion. We cut our food by slicing it with knives, and we cut our grass with spinning lawnmower blades. These objects in motion can cause the changes that result in getting something done. Imagine trying to push a nail into a block of wood with your hands. I don't know if you ever have tried that, but the nail head is very, very small, and my thumb is not strong enough to push a nail into a piece of wood. I could push a nail, but not on its head to actually go into anything. That would be nearly impossible to do. Now, imagine placing a hammer gently against the head of the nail and pushing the nail into the wood. You still would not move the nail into the wood. So if you've ever tried to tap, 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 like, you just place it right there and push it, nothing's going to happen. When something will happen, you might get a little bit frustrated that nothing's happening. But swing the hammer against the head of the nail, bang. And so that means when you have the hammer and pull it up and the motion's going down, hits the nail, and that makes a noise, and probably going to put the nail inside. You might need it a couple times depending on how hard you actually swing it. The hammer is heavy and the swing is fast. The moving hammer now has energy of motion. That energy can change the position of the nail, even forcing it into the wood. Energy from the moving hammer drives the nail into the wood. But what moves the hammer? The motion of the builder's arm provides the energy to change the position of the hammer. You can see with all of these parts, there has to be energy to be involved in this change. Like when we put the hammer right on top of the nail doesn't move. If I just hold the hammer up and don't swing it down, the hammer is still not going to move. I had to put my energy of my muscle to swing the hammer. Pendulum clocks. I bet you don't know what a pendulum clock is. We usually use digital clocks now. And even when we have clocks with the numbers on them on a round circle, they don't look like this. So this is a pendulum clock. You might have seen these in old movies, or maybe even when you visited older restaurants. Sometimes they have these cuckoo clocks. So those are pendulum clocks. And this is the pendulum. It goes back and forth. Engineers, such as clockmakers, have applied the energy of motion for centuries. Clockmakers are as early as the 1650s used their knowledge about the energy of a swinging pendulum to help tell time. Now, I'm not quite sure yet how this pendulum moving helps me to tell time yet. So let's keep reading. Oh, here we go. Look at the diagram of a clock shown here. So here's the diagram. Right. So I can see that it's labeled. There's an anchor down here. And then there are these brown parts, which I assume are the gears. So you see the kind of sharp edges here. And these, I think, are the hands on the clock, the hour hand and the minute hand. The reason I think that is because I can see on this ring 12, 3, 6. Those are the hours of the day. And then here's the pendulum. And I can see back here it has light gray, where it has the arrows. So that's showing me that the pendulum goes back and forth. Okay, so let's get back. The pendulum on the clock swings back and forth, tick, tock. As the pendulum swings, it causes changes to the position of the clock's gears. The gears, as a result, rotate the hands of the clock. Those hands point to the numbers around the clock's face, allowing us to tell time. Oh, I'm going to look back at this diagram again, because it says that the swinging causes the changes in the gears position. So if I follow the pendulum up here, I can see it's connected way up here to the anchor. So if this is moving, then this part moves, and then the anchor must move, right? Because it makes this gear go, makes this part go. Yes, can you? Maybe Brian can help us explain this diagram better.
It's interesting we're talking about energy because it appears that there's only one type of energy involved with this pendulum, and that's the energy of the swinging pendulum. But there's actually another source of energy here. And if you look right above the word pendulum, there's a little hanging part there. It's just a mass.
About that.
Yep. So there's that little mass. And what's happening with the clock is that little mass is pulling down. It's falling all the time. And it falls really slowly. What actually happens is that anchor keeps, so those gears are all connected to each other. The anchor keeps the mass from falling. But as the pendulum swings back and forth, it lets go for just 1 second of where the anchor is connected. And it's literally 1 second probably. So the pendulum swings back and forth. Each time it swings, the anchor is only connected on one side at a time. So it will be locking the right side, then locking the left side, then locking the right side, then locking the left side, and locking the right side. And each time it locks and unlocks, it lets that mass fall down a little bit more. So there are two types of energy here. There's the what's called potential energy of the mass that's falling, except it's not able to fall because the anchor is holding it in. And then there's the energy that someone has to add to the clock system by pulling back the pendulum. So you actually need to add two types of energy to this particular clock model. You'll have to wind the clock, which pulls that mass back up to the top. If that mass gets all the way down to the ground, or if it stretches out completely, then the clock's not going to run. And you also have to add energy to the pendulum on this clock. So you have to wind this clock and you have to set the pendulum in motion. So there's two types of energy that you have to add. And there's your clock talk.
Is this the part where the winding part goes up here, or does it?
It's not shown in this diagram. It would probably be behind that gear that's on the above the mass. So that probably the darkest gray gear. Yeah, so you'd probably have a key that fits in from the back of the clock or the front of the clock right there to wind it.
Well, maybe you boys and girls can see if you can find yourself a pendulum clock and look inside of it. See the gears going. All right. That's pretty cool. Thanks, Brian. Think about swing motion. The energy of motion of the pendulum arm causes changes in the gears. But what moves the pendulum arm? Gravity. Gravity pulls the arm down as it swings from its highest points on either side. A pendulum clock also has weights or springs that help pull or push on the pendulum. And that is the end of our chapter today. And so I'm going to send it back to Brian, who has some further direction.
Thank you, Miss Wynn. And I think you're still screen sharing there. So if you want to cancel your screen share. All right. And we ended up with our activity page. We can look over this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss the activity page in light of the demonstration that we did at the beginning of the lesson. So this says, identify an object that you know moves often. Well, you can certainly come up with your own, and I would encourage you to do that. I'm going to go ahead and use the example that we had in the beginning of this lesson. So I'm going to say our object is going to be a system of marbles. Now, that might not be a perfect example because the directions say to identify an object that you know moves often. So you might look for something that's moving a large part of the time, like the pendulum clock that keeps moving back and forth. So then it says, draw before and after diagrams to show how the motion of this object can cause a change. All right, so we are going to do our before moment. We're going to start by putting that drawing that cardboard ring. And we said that we saw a group of marbles sitting in the middle. And then we had one large marble on the outside. So draw before and after diagrams to show how the motion of this object can change. Well, if this is our system, right now it can't change. We had to have something do work or something add energy to the system. So in our case, I used my hand to add energy. And so I'm going to do my before drawing as the moment when this ball, the one I'll shade in dark, started to move. And people that draw cartoons have different ways to show drawings. When I teach science with students, I use little marks called whooshies. And so my whooshies are going to be used to show that that ball is moving. And so now I have my before and after diagrams. So I'm going to do my after diagram as the moment in time when that large marble had just hit the other marbles and maybe it bounced back the other way. Notice in our reading, Ms. Fong said that motion has two different things that you look at. You look at how fast it's moving, and you also look at which way it's moving. So now I've tried in my drawing to show that this marble is moving the other way. And this marble had scattered all of the other marbles. So I'm going to show those marbles moving all over the place. Now, if you remember the demonstration, they all ended up in one corner, but it's okay. We're still showing the main idea here. So one object had energy in the system. It transferred that energy to all the objects, and so all the objects had energy. Now, it's important to know that I chose to draw bigger whooshies here and smaller whooshies here, because when this object transfers some of its energy, when it gives energy to these other marbles, it can't make more energy. Something from the outside, from the surroundings, has to add more energy. Instead, we just have little bits of energy that would all add up to equal the same amount of energy there. So writing descriptions, well, I'm not going to write all these, but in this thing, I think the important thing to note is that before, only one object is in motion and has energy that was given from the surroundings. And after, there is a collision, and that allows the moving object to transfer its energy to all the objects that were not moving. And so now all the objects have motion, and we know from the reading that motion means that an object has energy. All right, we're going to continue to look at energy in our next lesson, and we're going to look at how energy and speed are connected. Thank you so much, Ms. Fong, for being with us today and going through our reading. One thing I do want to call out in the reading is I think there was one really, really meaningful sentence, and I don't know if it might be one worth adding to your sheet or to your notes, but I like that this text said that energy is the ability to cause change. So if you don't have energy, you can't cause change. And if you do have energy, you can cause change. I think that's really important because the misunderstanding might be that energy causes things to change. And that's not true. We talked about that in the last lesson. Things cause each other to change. All right. Hope you have a great day, and we will see you again in the next lesson. Thank you all.
Everyone.
Bye all.